I remember standing in the middle of my ritual circle, candles flickering all around me, the smell of incense thick in the air, and I was calling upon something. I had done this hundreds of times before, but this night was different. This night, something actually answered, and when I felt that presence fill the room, every hair on my body stood up because I realized in that moment that what I had been playing with for over 15 years was not some harmless spiritual practice. It was not just energy or manifestation or connecting with the universe. What rushed into that room was pure evil, and it looked at me like it owned me. And the terrifying part was, it did. I had given it legal rights over my life through every spell I had ever cast, every ritual I had ever performed, every spirit I had ever called upon. And now it was here to collect. But I am getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to the very beginning, because I need you to understand how a normal girl from a normal family ended up deep in the world of witchcraft. And more importantly, I need you to understand what really happens when you cast spells. Not the romanticized version you see on social media. Not the empowering feminine energy narrative that draws so many young women in today. I am talking about what actually happens in the spiritual realm when you light those candles and speak those words. Because I have seen both sides now, and the truth is far darker than anything I could have imagined when I first started down this path all those years ago. I grew up in what most people would consider a regular household. We lived in a small suburban neighborhood, the kind where everyone knew their neighbors and kids played in the streets until the streetlights came on. My parents were not particularly religious, but they were not against it either. We celebrated Christmas and Easter, but church was maybe a twice-a-year thing at most. My mom believed in being a good person, my dad worked hard to provide for us, and that was pretty much the extent of our spiritual life. But even as a young child, I had this emptiness inside of me that I could never quite explain. It was like there was a void in my chest that nothing could fill. I tried to fill it with friendships, with achievements in school, with relationships as I got older, but nothing worked. That emptiness just sat there, like a black hole consuming every bit of happiness that came my way. I remember lying in bed at night, maybe 10 or 11 years old, wondering why I felt so hollow when I had everything a kid could want. My parents loved me, I had friends, I did well in school, but none of it touched that ache inside. It was like something fundamental was missing from my life, and I did not know what it was or how to find it. When I was about 14 years old, one of my friends introduced me to tarot cards. Her older sister had a deck, and we thought it would be fun to play with them at a sleepover. She made it seem so innocent, just a fun way to get guidance about boys and school and friendship drama. Nothing serious, just teenage girls having fun with something mysterious and exciting. I remember pulling my first card and feeling this rush, this sense that I had tapped into something bigger than myself. It was like electricity running through my veins. For the first time in as long as I could remember, that emptiness felt a little less empty. Looking back now, I know exactly what that feeling was. It was not empowerment. It was not connection to the divine feminine or the universe or whatever else people want to call it. It was a hook being set in my soul. The enemy is patient. He does not come at you all at once. He introduces you to little things first, makes them feel good, makes them feel harmless, and then slowly pulls you deeper and deeper until you cannot find your way out. I became obsessed with tarot. I saved up my allowance and bought my own deck. I spent hours learning the meanings of every card, practicing spreads, doing readings for my friends at school and at parties. They thought I had a gift. I thought I was special. What neither of us understood was that every single reading was an act of divination, which the Bible explicitly forbids for very good reason. I was opening myself up to the spiritual realm without any understanding of what I was actually doing or what I was inviting in. The accuracy of those readings only pulled me deeper. When I would tell someone something that came true, it felt like proof that I was tapping into real power. I did not realize that the spirits giving me information were the same spirits that would later try to destroy me completely. After tarot came crystals. I started collecting them, each one supposedly carrying different energies and properties. Amethyst for intuition, rose quartz for love, black tourmaline for protection, citrine for abundance. I would sleep with certain crystals under my pillow, carry others in my pocket, place them around my room in specific patterns called grids. I believed these stones had power, and in a way they did, but not the kind of power I thought. They were objects of spiritual attachment, doorways that I was opening wider and wider with each new addition to my collection. After crystals came astrology, not just reading my horoscope for fun, but diving deep into birth charts, transits, planetary alignments, believing that the stars controlled my destiny and that understanding them gave me power over my life. After astrology came spell work. It was like climbing down a ladder into a pit, and each rung felt like progress, felt like I was becoming more enlightened, more powerful, more connected. The progression was so gradual that I never saw where it was leading until it was almost too late. By the time I was 18, I was practicing full ritual magic. I had an altar in my bedroom covered with candles, crystals, herbs, and symbols that I had researched and drawn myself. I was casting spells for everything. Love spells to make certain boys notice me. Spells to make a specific person fall for me regardless of their own feelings or will. Money spells when I needed cash for something. Protection spells because somewhere deep down I knew I needed protection, even if I did not understand from what. And yes, I cast revenge spells too, because here is something they do not tell you about witchcraft. It looks like light and love on the surface, but there is a darkness underneath that eventually consumes everyone who practices it. You start out wanting to manifest good things, but eventually the anger comes. The bitterness comes. Someone hurts you, and you think, why should I just let that go when I have the power to do something about it? And suddenly you are casting spells to hurt people who have wronged you, and you justify it by calling it justice or karma, or returning their energy back to them. The darkness creeps in so slowly that you do not notice you are becoming someone you would not have recognized when you started. I want to stop here and explain something that most people do not understand about spell casting. When you cast a spell, you are not just putting intentions out into the universe. That is the lie that makes witchcraft palatable to modern audiences. What you are actually doing is entering into an agreement with demonic spirits. Every spell is an exchange. You are offering something, your energy, your attention, your worship, and you are asking spiritual entities to do something in return. You are opening doors in the spiritual realm and inviting entities in. They do not care about your intention. They do not care if you think you are practicing white magic or black magic, light witchcraft or dark witchcraft. There is no such distinction in the spiritual realm. That is a lie invented to make people feel comfortable with what they are doing. All of it, every single bit of it, is an invitation for demons to enter your life, and they happily accept because they have been waiting for that invitation. They have been waiting for someone to crack open that door so they can rush in. I started noticing strange things happening around me, things that I could not explain away even if I tried. Objects would move on their own. A book would fall off a shelf when no one was near it. Things I had placed carefully would be in different positions when I came back to them. I would hear whispers at night, voices that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. Sometimes they would say my name. Sometimes they would say things I could not quite make out, words and languages I did not recognize. I would have sleep paralysis episodes where I would wake up unable to move, and I would see dark figures standing over my bed, shadows that were darker than the darkness around them, watching me with what felt like hunger. Sometimes I could feel them touching me, cold hands pressing on my chest or gripping my arms. But here is the twisted part. I thought these were signs that my magic was working. I thought I was becoming more sensitive to the spiritual realm because I was advancing in my practice. The witchcraft community taught me to welcome these experiences, to see them as signs of growth, to embrace the shadows as part of my spiritual journey. I had no idea I was being tormented by the very spirits I had invited in. What I thought was progress was actually bondage tightening around me, chains being added link by link. My personal life started falling apart in ways I could not explain. Relationships would implode without warning. I would meet someone, things would be going great, and then suddenly everything would fall apart in the most dramatic way possible. People would turn on me for no apparent reason. Friends of years would suddenly become hostile strangers. Opportunities would slip through my fingers at the last second. I would interview for jobs and be told I was the top candidate, only to have the position eliminated or given to someone else at the last moment. I developed anxiety so severe that some days I could not leave my house. The thought of going outside would send me into a full panic attack, heart racing, palms sweating, unable to breathe. Depression wrapped around me like a wet blanket that I could not shake off no matter what I tried. I would go days without showering, without eating, just lying in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering what the point of any of it was. And through all of this, I kept casting spells to fix things, which only made everything worse. It was like trying to put out a fire with gasoline. Every spell I cast to solve a problem created 3 new problems. But I was so deceived that I could not see the pattern. I blamed myself, blamed the universe, blamed everyone except the actual source of my destruction. By my mid-20s, I was what you would call a high priestess in my coven. We had about 15 regular members, mostly women in their 20s and 30s, and I was considered one of the leaders. I had been practicing for over a decade at this point. I was teaching other women how to cast spells, how to perform rituals, how to connect with spirits. I was leading Sabbath celebrations on the solstices and equinoxes, facilitating spirit communication sessions where we would use various methods to contact what we believed were benevolent spirits, ancestors, and guides. On the outside, I looked like a powerful, enlightened woman who had unlocked the secrets of the universe. People looked up to me. They came to me for advice. They wanted to learn from me. On the inside, I was more empty than I had ever been. That void in my chest had grown into a chasm that threatened to swallow me whole. I was suicidal but could not even admit it to myself. I would have thoughts of driving my car into oncoming traffic, of stepping in front of trains, of just ending it all. I was surrounded by what I thought were powerful spiritual allies, but I had never felt more alone in my entire life. The spirits I thought were helping me had become my prison guards, and I was too blind to see the bars of my cell. Then came the night that changed everything. It was a Thursday. I remember that clearly because I had taken the next day off work. I was performing a ritual that I had done many times before. It was supposed to be a simple invocation, calling upon a spirit guide for wisdom about a decision I was trying to make. I set up my circle, lit my candles, burned my incense, spoke my words. But something went wrong. Or maybe something finally went right, depending on how you look at it. When I called out into the spiritual realm, something answered in a way it never had before. The temperature in the room dropped so fast, I could see my breath misting in front of my face. The candles all flickered at once, violently, like something was moving past them, and then they went completely still. Not the normal stillness of a flame with no breeze, but an unnatural stillness, like they were frozen in time. And then I felt it. A presence so heavy, so oppressive, so utterly evil that my knees buckled underneath me, and I hit the floor hard. I collapsed to the floor of my ritual circle, and I could not move. It was like something was pressing down on my entire body, pinning me to the ground with a force that was not physical, but somehow more real than physical. I could barely breathe. The air itself felt thick, contaminated, wrong, like breathing in something toxic that was filling my lungs with darkness. And then I heard it speak. Not out loud, but directly into my mind. A voice that was not my own thought, but something foreign, something ancient, something filled with malice and contempt. It said, "You belong to us. You have always belonged to us." And I knew in that moment that it was telling the truth. Every spell I had ever cast, every ritual I had ever performed, every spirit I had ever communed with, they were all connected. They were all the same entity, wearing different masks, pretending to be guides and goddesses and benevolent spirits. But behind all those masks was something ancient and evil, and it had been hunting me since I pulled that first tarot card at 14 years old. Every step of my spiritual journey had been orchestrated. Every experience that made me feel powerful had been bait. I had walked right into a trap that was 15 years in the making, and now the trap was closing. I cannot fully describe the terror of that moment. It was not just fear, though there was plenty of that. It was the absolute certainty that I was owned by something that hated me, something that had been patient, that had played the long game, that had let me think I was in control when really I was being led like a lamb to slaughter. All those years of feeling empowered, of thinking I was tapping into some universal energy, of believing I was connecting with benevolent spirits, it was all a lie. I had been deceived from the very beginning, and now I was about to pay the price for my ignorance and my rebellion against the true God. And then, in my absolute desperation, when every other thought had been stripped away by terror, a name came to my lips that I had not spoken in years. Jesus. I do not know why I said it. I had rejected Christianity a long time ago. The witchcraft community had taught me that Jesus was just one of many ascended masters, nothing special, certainly not the Son of God. We had been taught that Christianity was a tool of oppression, that the church had persecuted people like us, that we were the enlightened ones who had moved beyond such primitive beliefs. But in that moment of pure terror, with that demonic presence pressing down on me, claiming ownership over my soul, the only word I could think of was Jesus. And so I screamed it. I screamed his name with everything in me. Jesus, help me. What happened next will stay with me for the rest of my life. The moment his name left my lips, that oppressive presence recoiled. It did not leave immediately, but it pulled back, like it had touched something that burned. The weight on my chest lightened. I could breathe again. And in the space that created, I felt something else enter the room. It was warm. It was light. It was love in a way I had never experienced love before, pure and unconditional and absolutely real. And I heard a different voice, gentle but powerful, saying, "You are not theirs. You are mine. I bought you with a price. Come home." I laid on the floor of my ritual circle and sobbed. Not tears of fear anymore, but tears of relief, tears of recognition. Because in that moment, I knew that Jesus was real. Not just real as some spiritual concept or ascended master or one path among many, but real as a person, as God, as someone who had just shown up in my darkest moment and saved me from the thing that owned me. Everything I had believed about spirituality came crashing down around me. All the lies, all the deception, all the years of thinking I was on an enlightened path, I could suddenly see them for what they were. A trap, a carefully constructed trap that the enemy had built specifically for me, baited with my emptiness, my desire for power, my need to feel special and connected. That night, I renounced every spell I had ever cast. Out loud, one by one, as many as I could remember, I renounced every spirit I had ever communicated with, calling them what they were, demons, and commanding them to leave in the name of Jesus. I renounced every ritual, every practice, every piece of witchcraft I had participated in for the past 15 years. Then I gathered every book, every tool, every candle, every crystal, every tarot deck, every piece of occult paraphernalia I owned, and I destroyed them. Not donated, not sold, destroyed. I burned what would burn and broke what would not, because those objects carried spiritual weight. They were doorways, and they needed to be closed permanently. The deliverance process was not easy. When you have been as deep in the occult as I was, the demons do not leave quietly. I went through months of spiritual warfare. There were nights when I would wake up screaming, feeling those same dark presences trying to reclaim what they believed was theirs. I would feel hands on my throat, pressure on my chest, voices in my head telling me that Jesus could not save me, that I belonged to them, that I should just give up and come back. But every single time, I called on the name of Jesus, and every single time, he showed up. The name of Jesus is not just a word. It is the most powerful weapon in the spiritual realm. Demons tremble at it. They have to obey it. I know this because I saw it happen again and again during my deliverance. I would speak his name and those entities would flee. They had no choice. His authority is absolute, and there is nothing they can do to stand against it. What I want people to understand is that witchcraft is not a game. It is not a harmless hobby. It is not female empowerment or spiritual awakening or connecting with nature. It is an open door to demonic oppression and, in some cases, possession. Every spell you cast creates a legal right for demons to operate in your life. Every spirit you communicate with is a demon pretending to be something benevolent. Every ritual you perform is an act of worship to entities that hate you and want to destroy you. They are patient. They will give you just enough to keep you hooked, to make you think it is working, to make you believe you are in control. But you are not in control. You never were. That is the great deception that the enemy has been running for thousands of years. The enemy's greatest trick is making people think he does not exist, or that he can be bargained with, or that there is some neutral spiritual ground where you can play with supernatural forces without consequence. There is no neutral ground. There are two kingdoms, the kingdom of light and the kingdom of darkness. And every spiritual practice that is not submitted to Jesus Christ is part of the kingdom of darkness. No matter how it is packaged, no matter how good it makes you feel, no matter how beautiful the aesthetics are on social media. Young women especially are being targeted by the enemy through witchcraft right now. Social media is full of content that makes it look beautiful and empowering. Crystals and tarot cards are sold in mainstream stores like they are normal household items. Astrology is treated like a fun personality quiz rather than what it actually is, which is divination. The packaging has changed, but the darkness underneath is exactly the same as it has been for thousands of years. One of the things that broke my heart most during my deliverance was realizing how many people I had led astray. All those women I taught to cast spells, all those rituals I led, all those seeds I planted in other people's lives. I had to repent for each one. I pray for those women constantly now, that Jesus would reveal himself to them the way he revealed himself to me. That is my prayer every single day. Since giving my life to Jesus, that void in my chest is gone. Not because I found something to fill it, but because I found the one who created it. That emptiness I tried to fill with tarot cards and spells and spirits was always meant to be filled by Jesus. He was what I was searching for all along. The enemy just got to me first and offered me counterfeits. But counterfeits can never satisfy. Only the real thing can. If you are watching this and you are involved in any form of witchcraft, I am begging you to stop. It does not matter how long you have been practicing. It does not matter how deep you are. It does not matter what kind of experiences you have had or how real they felt. Jesus can set you free. The same Jesus who showed up in my ritual circle that night will show up for you. All you have to do is call on his name. He is faithful. He loves you more than you can possibly imagine. And he is waiting for you to come home.